crossing the Delaware River in the dead of winter with his soldiers losing their toes to frostbite because they were wrapped in cloth instead of boots. From the beginning, people have said that. People have been counting America out for more than 200 years. So far, everybody that's bet against America has lost money. Now, maybe it's changed now. I don't begrudge the rise of China or the rise of India or the rise of, or the unification of Europe, which I strongly support. But we shouldn't want to run the world. We should just want to be a positive leading influence, and I believe we will be for the foreseeable future if we do what we need to do now. We're a little down now, but we're dealing with our health care crisis. We're dealing with our energy crisis. We have Senator Lieberman and Senator Graham here who have done everything they could to try to get America to find a sensible way out of the global warming conundrum. And I think we'll get out of this economic mess. So don't give up on us yet, folks. We're just getting a second wind.
In the year 2000, you formulated the Clinton parameters that gave the Palestinians almost all of the West Bank and most of East Jerusalem. Nevertheless, you remain popular among a vast majority of Israelis. While President Obama, who didn't offer the Palestinians 1 inch so far, 1 inch of real estate, is considered by many here as very hostile, and maybe the most hostile president in recent history. Do you have an explanation for how and why?
God, you could get a job with the American press asking me a question like that. Yes, I do. I know exactly how it happened. And the first thing I want to say is you shouldn't think that President Obama is your enemy, and I hope to goodness you know that Hillary is not. But it happened for perfectly predictable reasons. First of all, by the time I became president, I'd been thinking about this issue in Israel for a very long time. I had first come here in 1981. Secondly, by the time I became president, the secret talks at Oslo had begun. And I had run for president and made a fairly favorable impression of the Jewish community in America and did well in the election, partly because I said that we couldn't want a peace for the Israelis and the Palestinians more than they wanted it for themselves. That's still true today. But that if they were willing to work for peace, I would work overtime to do it, and I would always be honest about what I thought achieving peace would entail. Then the agreement was reached. The Declaration of Principles was signed on the White House lawn, and I developed one of the most rewarding relationships of my life with Prime Minister Rabin. So I had a big leg up here. I spent more time thinking about it, working on it, dealing with it, and just thinking about it in my own life before I ever became president. And then I entered the scene for Israel under fortunate circumstances. But we made progress when I worked with 4 prime ministers. And let me remind you, when Mr. Netanyahu was prime minister, when we made the agreement at Wye River, which is a very significant agreement, and Prime Minister Sharon was in the defense minister, and he was there and he supported it, or the foreign minister. So I mean, I think I had a lot of good fortune, but I also was particularly, I think, attuned to the language of the people and how they heard various things. I think that President Obama got a lot of press in the beginning of his candidacy for being sort of a global person, the first one we'd ever elected, at least in terms of his ethnic and racial background and his life experiences. And there was some criticism of him in the primary, not in the primary election, but in some of the press about having had relationships with Palestinians and other Arabs who were fairly hostile to Israel while in Chicago. There was almost no coverage of the very strong support that he enjoyed from leaders of the Jewish community in Chicago when he ran for president. And I noticed it because Hillary was trying to beat him and they'd all been for us before. So it was somewhat painful. But I say that to say I think that when we meet someone new, in any context, we're always looking for clues that will tell us something. And sometimes we overread what we hear. No American president could serve in good conscience and not be committed to the security of Israel. No American president, given what happened in the 1990s, given the state of play in the peace process, given what has happened in the West Bank with President Abbas and Prime Minister Fayyad, could serve and not want to speed this thing along. I think that it's obvious what happened to the relationship, but I think that you should not be negative about this. The United States, first of all, can't make you do something you don't want to do. And secondly, owes it to you if we're committed to your security and we have an automatic allocation of a substantial amount of federal funds every year. We owe it to you to say what we think the truth is about what the best way to achieve that security is. President Obama took office right as Gaza was ending. And everybody was wondering, well, what next? And I think if you look at the way the United States has tried to support you in not having the UN take this Goldstone report, the timing of which could hardly have been worse, and beat you over the head with it, and you look at a lot of other indicators, I just don't think you should be so negative about the Obama administration. Neither do I think that the thoughtful members of the Palestinian community and their friends throughout the Arab world should understand also that America cannot do the Palestinians any good in the progress toward a Palestinian state unless the Israelis continue to believe that our commitment to Israel's security is irrevocable. That's what gives us the leverage, if you will, to have an honest conversation and say what we think needs to be done. So, and there, you watch. It'll get better as it goes along. It'll get better for you, and I think it'll be better for the Palestinians because it's better for you. I just think it'll get better. But I think these negative inferences that have been drawn are overdrawn here. And President Obama had an enormous amount of contact and support from people in Chicago that I really respect, who are very devoted to Israel and to its security.
And Kwame Manuel, for example.
Yeah, among him. Of course, some of you are mad at him too, but he's just wrong. I'll tell you that, and if you needed to come back here and fight again, he'd do that. But I think that we, all Americans who wish you well, want to see some resolution of this ongoing difficulty with the Palestinians as quick as is feasible, because we, almost all of us, believe that the longer it goes unresolved, the more likely you are to get a bad outcome and the less likely you are to have a good outcome. And so, if we're not all as adroit at expressing that as I normally am, because I've been listening to the voices of the Middle East for a very long time, you shouldn't draw negative inferences about it. And you certainly shouldn't draw a negative inference about the president. He wants you to make peace, and he wants us to be committed to security, and he wants us to be there full bore in the aftermath to deal with whatever problems come up. And I think the fact that he asked Hillary to be Secretary of State, coming not only out of the experiences we had when I was president, but the fact that as a senator from New York, she represented more Jewish Americans than any other